Another shit video by Professor Anton. So we'll play this one. This one's precious. That's what we'll call it, precious. So start at 116.
Now, it must be brain chemistry in historical epoch, in culture, from culture, in family experience, in the depth and range of the way that people ultimately value life, the impracticality of it, the degree to which we do seem to have some kind of prerogative, at least as far as it's granted by biological capacity to procreate.
And there we go. So the resort to nature again. Just anytime you got to justify something, say nature did it. Again, this has already been counter-argued. I mean, really. Might makes right is nature's rule, okay? So you're just justifying people going out and saying, I'm bigger than you, tough shit for you, fella. I can naturally make a fist, I can naturally throw it into a face. You're just saying, yeah, well, that probably is the right thing to do because nature says so. Just complete bullshit. Ignores trying to detach human beings from their conscious decision. All right, you don't procreate automatically. You do it willfully.
Hey, I mean, as bodies who do have the capacity to come together and have other bodies come out of them, we do seem to have some sort of license. But okay. So
okay, again, you say some sort of license. So I have some sort of license just to kill people. The Nazis had a license to do what they did because they were bigger and stronger. So that gave them license to try. I mean, it's just the lamest, pukest garbage argument. It has nothing to do with right, wrong, philosophy, any kind of rational context. Just resort to nature. Just say nature says so. It's just nonsense. Absolute childish nonsense.
There's all kinds of other things that are going on. What I'm going to see if I can't do here, real quickly, and I would love to see some response from it. I don't know if Fred is calling himself an antinatalist, but
yeah, you don't know anything about this subject at all. That's apparent, right? So yeah, so you're going to argue with a guy who isn't really, advocating anything, and you'll avoid the argument with the people who are advocating something. You didn't read the book. You're such a fan of books. There's a couple of books out there. Read them.
I'd love to see some response from people who are antinatalists. Here's my best, as best I understand it. I obviously don't understand the argument that well.
That's right, you obviously don't, and yet you're just talking out of your ass, and that's why your videos are shit, because you're talking out of your ass.
Maybe that's part of it, but I don't find it persuasive, but I'm going to see if I can't, as best I can, try to give a refutation here.
Right, and so now all you're going to do is spout the same old arguments all over again, and you're not even going to add anything new to them. You're going to do it with more words and less concisely and less precisely, and fail all over the place. So bravo, thanks for the contribution.
On its own terms, and I would just like to hear what other people say. Okay, so here's my best attempt. Okay, so first, that persons who are unconceived are really no persons at all.
And so what he's basically saying is if I signed a contract when I was 20 years old, I had no conceived or produced children, and I signed them into slavery for $5. Okay, because I wanted $5, so I signed a contract with a guy and said, yeah, you can have my firstborn children. I'll sell them to you. But they don't really exist. They don't have any rights. Okay? And I certainly have no responsibility to them because they have no fucking rights. That's all you're saying. You're saying that every time we prevent a birth defect that's caused by some chemical, that we're just jerking off. We're not doing anything rational or sensible. Every time, it's just you could say this about every single thing made. If it had a horrible end game product, where in the future it caused grotesque problems, every rational person would understand that they have an obligation to that future, that those people are just as real as we are in terms of their capacity to be harmed. And so this is just another silly word game. You've just word gamed billions of people out of existence. I mean, it's your kind of mentality that has this country $17 trillion in debt that they'll never pay back, that they've basically sentenced their children into slavery to pay back. Yeah, this very idea that it's not my problem. My credit card has got to be paid by those assholes. I mean, yeah, bravo. Brilliant. Idiot.
The first axiom. And when I say that, I mean, although we can grant something like rights to future generations.
Right. So now you just said we can somehow grant rights to future generations, and now you'll just spend the rest of this fucking diatribe explaining how there is no such thing as a future generation.
They deny that. Should people have clean air, and should they have some resources available for them to thrive? Yes.
Yeah, so you'll pick and choose what little lines of complete irrelevancy you'll draw. You'll ambiguity. You'll just sit there, erroneous. Yeah, you just draw some erroneous lines that suit your particular sensibilities. You'll include chocolate ice cream, but not vanilla, because you're not a big fan of that. And you'll include like roast beef, but not I don't know, chicken al pupa. Because you don't care for that. I mean, it's just bullshit. You're just drawing erroneous lines and saying, yes, they have some rights, but they don't have these other rights because, well, frankly, we want to trespass on those rights, so that's why they don't have them. Yeah, right. Really rational.
Are those, who exactly are the persons who have rights, even though they've been unconceived? Well,
I'll bet you $10 one of them's going to be named Johnny and Bobby and Billy. I bet you.
And billions and billions. It's hard to imagine, and so in some sense, even though we want to recognize that, we really don't know what to do with that.
Oh, I think it's no problem at all to do something with it. You just register in your head, okay, yeah, I get the idea. We die, they take over. We die, they take over. Yeah, it just keeps recycling. Yeah, we can't sell them into slavery. ... Oh,
to say that all of these people, I mean, there potentially could be more people born than have ever existed, or who at least are alive on the planet right now. And to that point,
yeah, that's a minor giveaway, isn't it? Right there, is that you say there could be. Well, I mean, you're the people saying this human race thing is going to succeed, that it's going to somehow thrive, that it's got some sort of hope. So you think you would have that as one of your axioms, that there will actually be trillions of people in the future, because we are going to survive. We're not going to go flying over the cliff and leave carnage in our wake and little moaning and groaning bodies in the AK-47 bleak darkness. But it doesn't sound like you even believe your own bullshit. You don't even believe in the future, because you can't even acknowledge the inevitability that trillions of people will live in the future.
Rights outshadow ours, and we should all just end ourselves. But that doesn't really...
That's not exactly the argument. We're not ending ourselves in there. We're going to end ourselves. Ourselves get ended by nature, by the system, by the reality. Again, the argument is procreation. You just won't stay on that subject, and you'll just use these little word games to pretend that this is some kind of burden on us, okay? And no, it's not a burden, it's a choice.
Seem to make sense, because there is nature right here that's thinning people out, and I don't know if we have to take ourselves out. It may be doing it
ourselves again. So again, you just manipulating the rhetoric to make it sound like somehow you have to kill yourself to be an antinatalist. And somehow that's what it's about. No, it's about not procreating. It's about not imposing a bad design on a future generation, not perpetuating the Frankenstein. Okay, not making Frankenstein fertile. Passing a law that says, Frankenstein, no, you cannot reproduce. You're not a good idea.
Pretty good job to counter human overpopulation. I mean, there are...
It really isn't doing a very good job. That's the whole point. Okay, we kind of fired nature in terms of its, kill every third child scenario, or kill every two for every... You kill 2 for 1, right? That was nature's... blueprint, and yeah, we've completely reversed plus more that scenario. So now only 1 in 10 die, or whatever the number is.
There are other forms of natural disaster that will work counter to human reproductivity. I mean,
yeah, come on, get real. The only disasters that do that kind of wiping out of numbers, like World War II, 50 million. What natural disaster comes close to 50 million?
Birth rates themselves are changing. And again, these change from culture to culture. Okay, anyway, let's go back. So, persons who are not yet conceived are really not persons at all.
Yeah, well, that's just a silly premise, right? I mean, you're just using a technicality to discount somebody's existence. So I just call him a Jew, right? Oh, Jews aren't people. Blacks aren't people. You're just depeopleizing things that you know are going to exist, if they exist. You know it. I mean, there's, you know, and just saying, you're just pretending, just for the convenience of this argument, just for the convenience of not having to take responsibility. Now you just say they don't exist. And it's just complete bullshit. If I create an experiment where I can make human beings, and I can make them horribly, horribly misformed and uncomfortable, you know, just make them into like a giant vagina with 15 breasts on it, and it's just in horrible pain, and I go to you and say, will you give me a license to do this experiment? I mean, they don't exist yet, so you might as well give me a license, right? Wrong.
There is no person there, and that person, you can't give rights to non-people.
Yeah.
So
keep
even granting there is some sort of right that we all want to, we the living agree to here, and we have this value toward future generations. There are no people there. Okay, so
it's just such weasel behavior. Oh yeah, well we agree to it, then it's a right, but it doesn't exist unless we agree to it. So that's another. You played another word game. To basically just say, well, whatever the majority believes must be the truth. We're talking about philosophy and the truth. You're supposed to be making a counter argument, decisively demonstrating how it's logically flawed to believe that life doesn't have sufficient purpose or function to be sanctioned, for the experiment to be continued. And you're not even coming close to trying to do that. You're just playing word games.
The argument then begins with conception, for some people. Now, some people will say that life doesn't begin at conception, life begins at birth, or the personhood doesn't begin at conception. Some people will begin with birth. Let's start with the conception one. So, if a person believes that sentience and life begins at conception, then here...
Well, whatever. I mean, why create a completely idiotic false premise? A premise that even the religious might not even believe. They would believe the soul arises at the moment of conception. They're not going to say the thing feels. All right, so what is sentience now is not feeling, it's something else. So again, it's another word we can't use regularly anymore because it has to be redefined. All right, consciousness isn't consciousness, sentience isn't sentience. I mean, this is just complete bullshit.
Here the issue of rights comes in. This is a person who has rights, and it's their right not to be imposed upon. And yet, irony is that there's no way not to make an imposition.
Well, that's the flaw, exactly. There's no way not to make an imposition. That's the flaw. That's your dilemma. Okay, and you can't just say, well, isn't that ironic? That's not a solution to the dilemma. The way you have to solve the dilemma is to say, well, we're going to come up with some mechanism where we won't create anything else but balloon-chasing retards like ourselves who think there's a purpose in playing this game over and over and over and over and over again, and just keep killing the players every time they win the Super Bowl. Kill them. And then they'll, the new players will want to win. Because, yeah, once they win it, they're just not hungry enough anymore.
It would seem, as best I understand it, it would seem that it's just as much an imposition to tell this person, now that you're conceived, that you have to enter life, as it would be to impose upon them your belief that life is an imposition. That is, their right is to decide for themselves whether or not it is an imposition.
Well, whatever. I mean, the first imposition is the choice to conduct the experiment. Now you're saying we should conduct the experiment and wait for the rats in the experiment to say, what the fuck were you doing? What were you thinking? So you have to basically first dump a ton of imposition, enough imposition for them to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want this, I didn't ask for this. And we know that consciousness arises slowly, so when are you going to allow this autonomy to exist? You're going to let 7-year-olds say, nah, I mean, I broke my favorite truck. I don't want to live anymore. You're going to let them decide? No, of course not. You never will. We, in 2010, wouldn't even let a blind French woman with tumors popping her eyeballs actually out of her head, we wouldn't let her die humanely. So don't even talk to me about we're going to give people choice and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Till you do it, you got no business playing the game. All this talk about the perfect nuclear power plant you're going to build. I mean, that's all you're doing. You're just talking like some bogus, the scientists you would say are so bogus. You're talking about all this crap that you're going to give people. And so it's a rational, fair equation now because we're going to give people all these fucking rights. Well, until you give people the fucking rights, you have no business conducting experiments. So until you prove your nuclear power plant is fail-safe, there's no business you yammering, you're flapping your gums telling me how you're going to do it. You haven't done it. Do it. Then talk about your right to play the game.
And then second, whether or not the imposition of life is a warrant for non-entrance into life. It would seem that the person's right is to first decide for themselves whether it is an imposition, because I don't think imposition is a...
Well, like I said, there's just absolutely no point in spilling the milk. You know, I mean, you're committed the imposition. You don't have a choice. You don't get to say no retroactively, abort me. The person who finds it an imposition doesn't get to say, well, go back 10 years or 15 years or 18 years, whatever the number's going to be, and undo it, fucker, because you're not going to be able to do that. All right, so you're guaranteeing the imposition. You're not fixing the imposition. You're not eliminating the imposition. So once again, your kind have the responsibility. Again, we won't let anybody conduct dangerous experiments without license, permit, some sort of cause, reason, some sort of environmental impact statement, some sort of something that says why they need to do this, why it is necessary, or why it is productive. So make those arguments. Make the necessary argument or the productive argument. But don't keep playing this game like there's no cost. The cost is inevitable. If you play the game, you will create victims.
Fact. I think imposition is it's a value-loaded word, which, I mean, we could call it an imposition, but again, I have the biological capacity to procreate.
Again, I have the biological capacity to make a fist and move it forward in space. This is just a bullshit argument. Complete bullshit.
Now, that, it seemed, was that imposed upon me? See, I see some of it, you say yes, or your person says yes.
Yeah, and what was also imposed upon you was an education, or a capacity to reason, and a capacity to realize, oh yeah, I can't just throw my fist anywhere I want because it implicates other people's welfare. Again, that's the argument. You're implicating other people's welfare. You're rolling dice with their destiny, and that's bullshit. Okay, so until you know how the dice are going to turn out, you really have no business playing the game.
Imposed upon me. Well, then, if everything is an imposition, then it seems like even trying to end it all is just as much an imposition, right? You're imposed.
Well, again, it's an imposition on something that can't really exist. I mean, the difference between somebody who really exists and desires an addiction that currently exists, it has to be satisfied because it does exist. All right, but a desire, okay, in the future, if it isn't injected, okay, if we end all baseball now, the people in the future are not going to miss the baseball that doesn't exist. They will desire something else. They will want for something else. They will chase something else. So there's no, it's not the same game with misery and desire. There are two different things. Suffering and desire are two different things.
Imposing that then upon a person. So the argument that it's an imposition just for me doesn't really work, because the person, if there is a person there and the person has rights, then their right is to A, decide for themselves if it was an imposition, and B, decide.
Well, whatever. Like I said, this decide for itself, you're not going to allow people to do in a timely manner, so that's completely irrelevant. We don't even have evidence that human race has so far allowed people to do it in a very past timely manner. So it's just a bullshit argument. Make the world better before you declare it better.
Whether or not that imposition was significant enough to warrant not having been. The claim better to have not been, to me, just doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's because you got a small mind, I guess, right? I mean, it's not that complicated a term, all right? And it's based on this idea that, yeah, if somebody is addicted, better not to be addicted. You could replace the word been with addicted. Better never to have been, you know, caught up in the pointless chase game. I mean, you could use other metaphors for the word bin. Bin. What is binning? What is binning? What are we doing here? Again, you keep running from that argument. But what exactly are we accomplishing here besides chasing bullshit?
That's a claim that, again, better is an evaluative word, it has a frame of reference, and if you wouldn't have been, you wouldn't have a sense of better or worse. You know, I just don't understand the expression even.
Well, whatever. Like I said, that's because you're not even trying, and you're just playing word games. So, of course, somebody who doesn't try and just plays word games, and is, I guess, your literacy's got to be pretty dim if you can't understand metaphor and concept like that. Yeah, so I guess you ought to read some more books because you don't know what words are, and you don't know what word play is, and you don't know what poetry is, and you don't know what metaphor is. Because it really isn't that complicated an idea. Okay, that something, Frankenstein, was better never to have been.
So now, let's back up. The person says life doesn't happen at conception, you know, and they want to support, and again, I think there's lots of women who have their rights being imposed upon by the antinatalists. I'm surprised that there aren't more women who are either pro-lifers, just, you know, I guess they're probably ignoring the antinatalists, but even pro-choicers, because the antinatalist is cutting.
And so again, what would be the argument the woman could make? Is that she has some, again, resort to nature. She has a natural desire to cuddle her own born baby. Okay, it's not just babies. No, it's her own. It has to be genetically her own. It has to fly out of her own uterus. And if she isn't allowed to go through that process, that somehow she's been denied something, well, maybe we can make a synthetic baby for her. Maybe we can have uteruses so they fill up full of a bunch of blob, and so they can force it through their uterus and, you know, placenta, and have all the blood and the slime fly out of them, so they can really enjoy that experience. And then, you know, after birth, we can give them a puppy. Yeah, that they can cuddle.
Against pro-choice as well, right? Okay, but that aside, say the person says that sentience begins at birth. Okay, now if they do this, it would the entire.
Well, I don't even know who does that. So again, that's just the stupid, idiotic premises you keep establishing for arguments that don't really reflect any spoken philosophy. Whose spoken philosophy are you representing here? Somebody actually believes that something is 5 minutes before birth, it's one thing, and 5 minutes after birth, it's something else. I think it's a very tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the human population.
Argument seems carried over again, right? I mean, the argument is the person gets to decide for themselves whether or not, quotes, life is an imposition, and B, whether or not that imposition was significant enough to have warranted not having been.
Well, again, you can't give people the right to retroactively undo something where you took advantage of them as a kid. How are you going to do that? I mean, it's just stupid. We should let people rape kids and let the kid decide when they're an adult whether or not it was a crime. Or something like that. I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
And they get suicide as an option. So if, to the extent that suicide is physiologically possible, and especially it is an option for a self-conscious creature, the antinatal...
It's almost an insult to this subject of a right to a graceful exit to have to argue it in this context. Okay, it is not the victim's obligation to correct for this problem. It is these aggressive people who are claiming entitlement to roll dice with something else's welfare. They're the ones who have to justify their imposition. And you keep wanting to change it. Now the victim has to justify why it didn't commit suicide, or why it didn't say I want to commit suicide early enough, and why it didn't pass through the legislature a bill that allowed 5-year-olds to commit suicide gracefully. Yeah, so it's all on them somehow. They're the ones that have dropped the ball. Oh, it's so fucking ludicrous.
Position is so much more of a denial of individual rights, and so much more.
No, I think there's just so much more a pile of preposterous duty and shit.
Of an imposition upon others' prerogatives. Now,
yeah, their prerogative to play, conduct biological experiments, to play a risk game with something else's welfare, something as important as consciousness. And they will decide whether you will be born with ALS, or you'll be born with however you're going to be born, into whatever circumstances you're going to be born, and whatever fate you're going to be born, and that somehow they have the competence to conduct the experiment. And that's just bullshit.
Let's back up even further. Say a person says that sentience...
I mean, you can't get any closer to playing God, can you? Than to creating, reproducing life forms? I mean, isn't that the big magic of God's game? It wasn't that he made an earth, and he made the stars, and he made the universe, and he made the waters, and he made the waters fall, and he made the blah, blah, blah. It was that he made these little reproducing animatrons, okay? That was the glory of God's creation, right? So every time a human being makes a conscious choice to sit there and play that game, they're the ones playing God. And again, they're another lame, irresponsible, unaccountable God. Just like the gods people pray to, they have no capacity to provide a refund, they have no capacity to fix the problem, and they'll ignore it, and they'll cop out of their responsibility just as weaselly as the gods the human race bows to.
Isn't simply biologically imposed. Now, here's a person says sentience doesn't simply occur with conception, it doesn't occur with birth, but it happens through some sort of acculturation process by which the child...
Acculturation? No, it just happens through simple maturation. Okay, you know, yes, culture will give you a language, give you a lot of things, but you're going to be able to feel, okay, whether you have a culture or not.
Enters into the society as a validated member. So now here you have in many cultures, right? I think we all know this historically, particularly.
Who the fuck cares? Again, this is how you have a stand on its own counter argument to antinatalism, is to keep resorting to culture. Who the fuck cares about culture or tradition? The argument is what is fair, what is rational, what is reasonable, what is logical.
Before abortion was practiced, before there was practices of abortion, many cultures gave women the prerogative to allow that child, that person, entrance into society or not. There were cases of there were too many babies, and they practiced population control, and the woman's prerogative was to expose it, to leave it out and let nature take its course. They didn't kill it, they would leave it out and they would let nature take its course.
Yeah, right. So again, they played word games, right? They didn't kill it, they just knew it was going to die. Just as you know when you have kids that it's going to impact somebody who will exist. And that just because they don't exist at the time you make your decision, and they don't get to raise their hand and say, fuck you, you're an idiot, I don't want to be your motherfucking son because you're a fucking retard. Because they don't get to voice their objection that somehow their rights don't exist.
The notion was that sentience is something that emerged with community, with
Oh, again. So again, why are we bothering with words? Right. So animals, all animals aren't sentient because they don't have community and they don't have culture, and you know they didn't read Dr. Seuss when they were 5 years old. Okay, fine. Let's just blow the language up some more. Way to go, communications professor. Brilliant.
I guess I think there's again, the more that we move toward sentience isn't just a thing that becomes imposed upon a piece of biological.
I'll be back. Okay, he's saying sentience, as he says it, isn't something that's imposed on a piece of biological,
Protoplasm or a piece of flesh. It's not just imposed upon it, but that sentience itself is a misnomer. I mean, there really is no thing, sentience.
Oh, whatever. Where do you go with this crap? Now, there's no such thing as feeling. Fine, whatever. Blah, blah, blah.
There are different forms, modes, characters, tenors, flavors, and we're continuously changing the experience of sentience. Not only is sentience different at different times of the day when we're more awake.
Oh, whatever. What does this have to do with a goddamn thing? I mean, this is just a game, more game playing. That's all. More game playing. Let's get so distracted that we're not even on the subject anymore. And so, build yourself some kind of sentience straw man to say that somehow we don't feel anyway, so it doesn't matter if we impose feelings because they don't really exist either.
Sleepy, but it has, as we're having conversation, we're changing our own experience of the world, the way the world feels, of its character.
Oh, the way the world feels now. Oh, come on.
I guess part of the problem, to me, with the argument is of the notion of sentience as if it were a thing.
Well, whatever category you're going to put it in, we know it is a phenomenon. It doesn't matter, really. Okay, it is something we can point at. Say, that thing feels, that thing doesn't. Okay, we can identify the difference between this spoon and a rat. We can tell that the big difference is the rat feels and the spoon doesn't.
Many people are sentient in so many different ways, and you can't really separate out sentience from cultural differences.
Oh, whatever. You people seem quite capable of doing all kinds of separating of all kinds of things and say, well, this sentence I'll make love to and this one I'll have for dinner. So you're the one that's full of shit.
The historical conditions under which sentience is unfolding, I guess all of the biochemical and the emotional and the particularities of that person, but also the way that they have come to terms with themselves.
Oh, whatever. Oh, the way they learned how to put on their shoes and their socks and not to trip over their own feet and not to pick their nose in public. Oh, it's miraculous. And the humanities.
The community in their life, in their everyday practices, that, again, sentience isn't just like a thing in a box that we can measure.
Who's measuring it? We're just saying it exists. Oh, man, what does this have to do with the fucking subject?
It has valuation as part of its character, and I don't know. It seems to me, and again, I'm struggling.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling to understand why people wouldn't want to be imposed upon. Why they wouldn't think that life is really kind of futile and stupid. Why don't you like being addicted to heroin? The rest of us alkies love it. I mean, that's all you're saying, you fucker. You're just saying, look, we're a bunch of alcoholics. We love being alcoholics. We love puking on kids and shit. It's fun as hell. Fuck you. That's all you're saying, Professor. You're doing nothing else. You're saying you have a little phantasmagorical little boner for pink balloons, and you love chasing them, and you really don't give a fuck what you step on while you do it.
With the argument, again, Fred, when you said your statement, I guess, to me, I would like to hear, A, what you think the antinatalist maybe argument is that you saw was so irrefutable.
Oh, well, whatever. He's already outlined that one, right? And they have certainly outlined it clear enough. There's the imposition argument 1. 2, there's the futility argument 2, that life was built by a DNA molecule, it is unintelligent design, and it really can't do a goddamn thing but clean up the mess that it makes. That's all sentience can do in the universe, is make a mess, clean up half a mess.
That would help me posse up my resources better. But how would you respond to some of these arguments? And again, just very simple.
Well, maybe he should just take a shit and videotape it and play it back at you. How about that be?
Really quickly there. The rights of the person are, first, only granted to real people.
Yeah, really. Again, that argument just dies, okay, of its own silly. I mean, it's got such heavy clown garb on. You know, it's got like 6 tons of clown garb on. It's just going to collapse from its own clown weight. It's just a silly proposition that the future doesn't have rights, that the non-existent don't have rights. They have a right to our consideration. They are just as real as we are in terms of their vulnerabilities and capacity to be harmed. The only way you can escape that right is to say they don't exist, or they won't exist. That's what you have to be able to say. And until you can say they won't exist, you don't have a right to play a game with their welfare.
By real people, I mean at least a person conceived, maybe a person born, maybe a person in a full society. We can vary what we're going to mean by personhood. But there, we're going to grant rights to a person.
Right, so we can sell our kids. As long as we haven't conceived it yet, you can sell it. That doesn't make any sense, Professor.
Person is someone who has the right to A, determine for themselves whether or not life, quotes, was an imposition, and then B, to...
Well, whatever. I don't know why it's up to Fred to dispute these arguments, but, you know, whatever. I mean, he hasn't committed to the philosophy, Professor.
Determine for themselves whether or not they would have deemed that imposition so harsh enough to have warranted their own not having been. Doesn't it seem like people have some prerogative because they can't procreate? And doesn't it seem like people...
They can, okay, because they can procreate. Like I said, I can buy a gun, point at you and shoot it. So what? That gives me the right to do it? I don't think so.
Also have some prerogative because suicide is an option for a self-conscious creature.
Let's not even get into this. Suicide is an option. Again, why is it the imposee? So it's a victim's responsibility to clean up their crime scene. No, I don't think so.
I guess I really don't understand how there isn't the greatest imposition for one to decide for another person whether or not life is worth living. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's, like I said, you're just talking like a true gang member, so you're part of the gang of the like I said, the balloonaholics, the retardards, and you're just saying, no, you're imposing on me, okay, by walking down the street, by getting on our turf, by telling us what we're responsible to take care of, or what we have an obligation to do. And it's just bullshit. You make your world first. You're going to say the world's good enough? It's not. You're going to say it's going to be good enough? Then prove it. Demonstrate it. Make it. You're not doing any of those things. You're not even convinced it's going to exist, and that's the truth. So, whatever. Fail. Shit video. Yeah, just like that. Shit video.